So you just finished building your brand new gaming PC and you don't know what to do next. Not only am I going to show you how to finish setting up the PC, but I'm also going to show you the important settings to change in the BIOS and on Windows itself so that you are getting the maximum FPS in your games. Believe it or not, but there are still some important settings that you have to change in your PC to make sure that you are not leaving any extra performance on the table. So with that said, let's begin with the Windows operating system installation. This is the part where we're going to be downloading the Windows operating files onto a flash drive and install it on our PC. If you're coming from my previous build guide or you have done this step already, feel free to skip to the next section. For everyone else watching, you're gonna need an empty flash drive with at least 8 GB of space and access to a PC that has internet connection. Plug the USB drive into the PC and visit the Windows installation website. If you want to install Windows 10, visit the Windows 10 disk image website. And for Windows 11, visit the Windows 11 website instead. Both will be linked down below. Once you're on the main page, make sure to click on the correct download link. You want to download the media creation tool and not the installation assistant. Once that is downloaded onto your PC, open it up and follow the instructions. You're going to want to accept the terms and keep everything on default for the next page. Then click Next and select the USB drive option. After clicking Next again, make sure to select the USB drive that you've connected to the PC. Please note that everything on the drive will be erased, so double check and make sure you don't have anything important on there before moving forward. The installation will do the rest and it will install the operating system on your flash drive, and this can take a while depending on how fast your internet speed is, so sit back and relax and let it do its thing. After it's complete, it will tell you that the USB flash drive is ready. So just hit the finish button and remove the flash drive. Now, this is the best time to grab a Windows CD key. If you already have one, you can skip over to the next section of the video. But if you don't, you're gonna need one to activate Windows. You can use literally any website you are comfortable with. You can even buy it directly from Microsoft, but if you want to save a lot of money, you can buy from VIP or CDKey.com, which is the place I get my keys for all of my PC builds on the channel. I like using VIP or CDKey because they are fast, reliable, and their customer service is the best. They do sell Windows 10 and Windows 11 CD keys, but it's important to buy the correct version. The version of Windows that you purchase has to match the version of Windows you are installing on your PC. For example, if you're installing Windows 11 Pro, make sure to buy a Windows 11 Pro key. A Windows 11 Home key won't work. If you guys are picking up a key from here, make sure to use the code TS20 to get an extra discount. And after checking out, visit the User Center up top, then click on your purchased orders and view the key. Make sure to write this down somewhere because you are going to need it later in the video to activate Windows. Now, before we continue with the operating system installation, let's change a few settings in the BIOS first. Make sure to plug in your keyboard and your mouse into the back of your motherboard's USB ports. You can also plug in your display cable from your monitor into the back of the graphics card. Do not plug this cable into the back of the motherboard, otherwise you will most likely not get any display. Hit the power switch on the back of your power supply and proceed to power on your PC. If for some reason you're having issues getting display on your monitor or your PC isn't powering on, I recommend pausing this video and watching my troubleshooting video on YouTube, which I'll link below or on the top right corner of the screen. After you guys fix the issue, you can come back and continue watching from here. You might get a first-time BIOS message on the monitor asking you to go into the BIOS. If that's the case, then just hit the button it tells you to go into the BIOS. If it doesn't, it will automatically take you to the BIOS anyways. If you guys installed an all-in-one cooler like this into your PC and you plugged in the pump header cable into the CPU fan header cable on your motherboard, then this is the setting we have to change in the BIOS to make sure that the pump is running at a constant speed. You should always run the pump of your cooler at a constant speed, that way it maintains a steady flow of liquid through the cold plate. If you guys aren't using an AIO cooler, skip to the next section of the video. So once again, if you guys installed an all-in-one cooler and you have this cable, which comes directly out of the pump, and you plug this into the CPU fan header or any other fan header on your motherboard that doesn't have the words pump on it, then this is what you have to do. Once you're in the BIOS, navigate to the fan settings. Usually you can find this right on the main menu. If you're on an ASUS board, it's called Q Fan Tuning, and on some other motherboards, it's in the hardware monitor tab up top. I would recommend going into the advanced menu first as it's a lot easier to find the setting that you're looking for. In most motherboards, it's the F7 button on your keyboard that you have to press. If not, it usually tells you which one it is near the bottom. Anyways, once you're in the fan control settings, locate the fan header that the cable is plugged into. In my case, I plugged the pump cable into the CPU fan header. So I'm going to simply click on the fan profile and change it to full speed. If your pump is extremely loud at full speed, you can set it to 1 speed lower. In my case, 1 speed lower is called turbo mode. After you are happy with the current setting, just hit F10 to save the changes and restart the PC. Okay, next step. Did you mount your graphics card vertically or horizontally? If you mounted it horizontally like this, you can skip on over to the next section. If you mounted your graphics card vertically and you're using a riser cable, and you're experiencing any sort of black screen or game crashes, then we have to go into the BIOS and set the speed of the PCIe slot manually to ensure that your graphics card is stable. This is especially common if you're using a newer gen GPU with an older gen riser cable. So let's go ahead and restart the PC and get into the BIOS. Then navigate to the advanced settings and locate PCH configuration, and then go into the PCI Express menu. Ideally, you would have plugged the graphics card on the top PCI slot of your motherboard, because typically it's the fastest lane. If that's the case, we're going to find the lane your graphics card is plugged into, which should be labeled X16, and change it to match the gen of your riser cable. If you're using a Gen 5 riser cable, set it to Gen 5. If you're using a Gen 4 cable, set it to Gen 4, so on and so forth. Only do this if your GPU is experiencing black screens or stability issues on the default auto settings. After you have selected the correct gen, just hit F10 to save the changes and restart the PC. Resize Bar is also another setting I highly recommend enabling in your BIOS if it isn't already enabled, because in some cases it will actually boost your frame rates in games. If your motherboard has this option available, I would enable it. There are no downsides to keeping it on. You either gain extra FPS in games or you don't. So once you're into the BIOS, switch over to the advanced menu and go into the advanced section. Over here, we're going to find the setting that says PCI subsystem or something similar. Once you're in here, simply enable Resize Bar support if it isn't already enabled by default. In some other motherboards, you might have to enable 4G decoding first in order to get access to the Resize Bar support. After that, just hit F10 to save changes and reboot the system. Flashing the BIOS is completely optional. If your PC is stable and it's not running into any issues, then I don't recommend flashing your BIOS. It's one of those things where if it's not broke, don't fix it. So if you don't want to flash the BIOS, then just skip over to the next section. If you do, this is how you're going to do it. First thing you're going to do is grab a flash drive. Make sure this is a new and formatted drive, because it's going to be a lot easier to locate the BIOS file. Head on over to your motherboard's website by searching the model name and find the support tab. Scroll down and click on the BIOS tab and download the latest BIOS version. Once the files are downloaded, open the folder and then you can extract the folder. After the entire folder is extracted, you can open it up and transfer the BIOS file, which is usually a cap file, into your USB drive. Some motherboards will come with a rename tool which will rename the BIOS for you. That way the motherboard can recognize it easier. I do recommend running the rename tool before transferring the BIOS file into your USB drive. After the file is transferred, remove the USB drive and plug it in the back of your PC into the USB port that's labeled BIOS. Some motherboards have a BIOS flashback button, meaning you can flash the BIOS while the PC is off by simply pressing the button. If yours doesn't have a button, just simply power on your PC and go into the BIOS by pressing on the delete key on your keyboard. On most motherboards, the flash BIOS button should be right there on the main menu. If yours doesn't show up, switch to the advanced menu. Then go ahead and navigate to the tool category up top and click on the setting that has the words flash. You're going to navigate to the USB drive that you plugged in and locate the CAP file and open it. Please note that you might have to switch the filter to CAP instead of zip so that the file can show up on the flash drive. After opening up the file, just confirm that you want to flash the BIOS and hit yes. Whatever you do, do not shut off your PC during this update process, as it will probably break your system. It will restart the PC a few times, so don't freak out, but once it's all done, it will take you to your desktop. Okay, now we are ready to install Windows onto our PC. So grab the USB drive that we just installed the operating system on and plug it into the back of your PC. After powering on the PC, it will automatically detect the flash drive that's plugged in and it will take you to the installation page. If it doesn't and it kicks you back into the BIOS, then just simply try a different USB port in the back. And if that doesn't work, restart the PC and hit the F8 key on your keyboard or whichever your boot menu key is. That way you can manually boot from the flash drive. If all else fails, reformat the flash drive and re-download and install the operating system on here. And if that still fails, I recommend watching my build guide from the following timestamp to troubleshoot. After you guys figure out the issue, come back and continue watching the video. Anyways, if everything works accordingly, then it should bring you to the installer. And you just have to follow the prompts on the screen until you get to the Activate Windows screen. If you already purchased your key from before, you can put it in here. Otherwise, you can go back to the following timestamp to learn how you can pick up a CDKey for cheap. If you want to do all of this later, just simply click on the I don't have a product key on the bottom to skip the activation for now until we finish the installation. This next page is very important. We have to select the correct version of Windows that we are installing onto the PC. This has to match the CDKey that you purchased or are planning on purchasing. If you bought a Windows 11 Home key, then make sure to select Windows 11 Home. If you bought a Windows 11 Pro key, then select the Pro option instead. On the next page, just accept the license terms, and on the following page, we are going to click on the Custom option. This is the page that will show you all of your storage devices that the PC recognizes. If your drive doesn't show up here, then there's something wrong. I would go back and make sure all the connections are plugged in correctly, and as a last resort, you can watch my build guide from the following timestamp listed on the screen. Then you can come back and continue from here. I always recommend selecting the fastest drive for your operating system. In my case, I have a 1TB Gen 5 SSD and a 4TB Gen 4 SSD. The Gen 5 SSD is much faster, and that is where I want my operating system installed so I can take advantage of the faster boot times. So I will select the 1TB unallocated space and hit next. Windows will now do its thing and install the operating system on the drive. This can take anywhere up to 30 minutes depending on the speed of your storage device, so just kick back, relax, and let it finish. It might even restart a few times. After it's done, it will automatically take you to the Windows setup page. So once again, follow the on-screen prompts until you get to the network page. When you finally get to the network page, you can go ahead and plug in your Ethernet cable in the back. If your Wi-Fi or network shows up, feel free to connect to it and continue the setup process. Please note that you will be required to log into your Microsoft account if you do this. But if you want to skip the account login page, continue watching. If you want to skip this entire step and connect to the internet and your Microsoft account later, then all you got to do is hit the Shift and F10 key on your keyboard to bring up the command prompt, and then type in ubi/bypass NRO. This will bypass the network and Microsoft account requirement, and you can finish the rest of the setup process yourself. Please note, it might restart your PC and make you do the beginning stage of the setup again, but once you get to the network section, you will now have the option to select I don't have internet, which will skip the Microsoft account setup and the internet connection. I do, however, recommend disabling all of the analytics options on the next page before moving forward. Your PC might restart a few times until it finally takes you to the desktop. Before we start optimizing your PC, let's go ahead and download and install the drivers first. If your PC can't connect to the internet via Wi-Fi or hardwire, then you will need access to the internet on a different PC to download the drivers. If you're running an AMD CPU and/or an AMD graphics card, it's very easy. Just download the all-in-one AMD driver app from the AMD website, which I'll link below, and just simply open it and let it do its thing. It will automatically check the latest driver for your CPU and the GPU, and it will update it for you. If you're running an NVIDIA graphics card, then you would have to download the NVIDIA app instead, formerly known as GeForce Experience. Once you are on the NVIDIA app, just click on the driver section and click on Check for Updates. If there's a new driver available, it will download and install it for you. Intel GPUs have their own website as well, and once again, I'll leave a link to all of these down below. And finally, if you're running an Intel CPU, you will need to download the Intel chipset driver instead. You can find this on your motherboard manufacturer website. For example, this PC is rocking an Asus Z890 motherboard. So I'm going to Google that on the browser, find the official motherboard website, and click on the link. Once I'm on the motherboard main page, I'm going to navigate to the support tab, and over here you will find the Intel chipset driver. While you're here, you might as well download the rest of the drivers for your PC. And this goes for everyone, regardless if you're running an Intel or AMD CPU. You're going to need the following files: Wi-Fi, LAN, the Realtek audio drivers, Bluetooth if your motherboard supports Bluetooth, and some optional downloads that include the Armory Crate if you're running an ASUS motherboard. This is an all-in-one software that will give you control over your RGB lights in the system. It will also keep your ASUS devices updated, and you get access to nice overclocking features. Anyways, once all the files are downloaded onto the USB drive, simply transfer them to the PC desktop first before you extract the files. This is very important. After you extract all the files, open them up one by one and install them onto the PC. Quick note, you're gonna want to open up the file that says setup on there. In my case, I'm using an ASUS motherboard, so the file name is gonna have ASUS setup. Now that all the drivers are downloaded and installed, it's time to change a few important settings in your PC. First things first, let's change the refresh rate of your monitors. By default, the refresh rate is always set to 60 Hz. This is common when you buy a new monitor or you do a fresh install of Windows. So if you're running a monitor with a refresh rate of 75 Hz or higher, we have to enable this manually. Right-click on the desktop, go into the display settings, click on the monitor you want to change, and scroll down and click on Advanced Display. Then simply click the drop-down menu and set it to its maximum refresh rate and hit apply. Do this for every monitor that you have plugged into your PC. While we're here, go into the graphics settings, click on the option to change the setting up top, and make sure the bottom and top settings are both enabled. I actually tested this myself. These two settings alone are responsible for gaining about 40 FPS in Marvel Rivals 4K settings, and even more on some other games. If you have Windows 11, these settings are usually set on by default, but if for some reason these settings are off, make sure to enable them. Next step, let's make sure that your CPU is able to run at its max clock speed if it needs to. Hit the Windows button on your keyboard and search for Power Plan and click on the Choose Power Plan option. You always want to make sure to select High Performance. All this does is it makes the CPU run at full speed when it's needed. So if you're gaming or using programs that stress the CPU, Windows will allow the CPU to achieve its max clock speeds. Now, this won't bring you any significant performance gains by any means. We're talking anywhere between 1 to 5 FPS at the most. This was actually tested by Cyber CPU Tech. But yeah, nothing significant here by any means, but it's a setting that I always recommend to be turned on, just so we're not leaving any performance on the table. On the contrary, if you're using an X3D CPU, it's recommended that you keep the power plan at balance mode instead of high performance. That way the 3D V-cache is being utilized properly. In some games, you'll actually lose performance running on high performance mode instead of leaving it on the balanced power plan. And this is especially true if you have PBO enabled in the BIOS. So to recap, if you're running an Intel CPU or an AMD non-X3D chip, run it at high performance mode. If you're running an AMD CPU with PBO enabled, or you're running any AMD X3D CPU, enable balanced mode instead. If you installed any additional storage devices in your PC and they don't show up under My Computer, then chances are you didn't enable them. We actually have to do this manually. Hit the Windows button on your keyboard and search for disk. Then go ahead and find the Format Hard Disk option and click on that. Here you'll see a list of all of your storage devices, whether they are activated or not. You can tell which ones are not activated by the words unallocated. They also have a black border on the top. We're simply going to click on the unallocated storage device and click on New Simple Volume. Then just follow steps here carefully, leaving everything on its default setting. Unless you want to manually assign a drive letter, then you can change that here. And on the next page, you can name your device if you want to, and then hit next and click on finish. The system will then refresh itself, and when you go back into My Computer, you can see that the drive is now there and ready to be used. Okay, now is a good time to enable XMP, also known as Extreme Memory Profile. By default, when you build a new PC or install new memory sticks, you're actually running at a much lower clock speed than you're supposed to. It's your responsibility to go into the BIOS and enable the setting, that way it's running at its max speed. Enabling this one setting in the BIOS will actually improve your frame rates in games. You can check this right now on your PC while watching this video. Just right-click on the taskbar and click on Task Manager. Then navigate to the Performance tab and click on Memory. On the bottom, it will show your memory's current speed. And if this is much lower than what your memory should be running at, then it simply means that the XMP is off. Okay, so we're gonna restart our PC and hit the delete key on the keyboard until we get into the BIOS. Then we're gonna navigate to the overclocker tab, sometimes called AI Tweaker. Do keep in mind, if the overclocking tab does not show up, then you have to switch over to advanced mode. Scroll down until we find the extreme memory profile section, and then we're gonna hit enter and set the first profile we see. Usually it's called XMP1, and in some other cases it might be called XMP2 or Profile 2. In some cases it might even be called DOCP instead if you're running an ASUS board. That's all we're going to change here in the BIOS, so just hit F10 to save the changes and restart your PC. Once you're back on the desktop, go back into the taskbar manager and confirm that the XMP was successful. If your memory clock speeds are now matching the speed of your memory, then you're good to go. Now, if for some reason the XMP failed and you're experiencing crashes or black screens, then we have to restart the PC and go back into the BIOS and downclock our memory. So once you restart your PC and you're back into the BIOS, go back into the overclocker tab and then scroll down until you find your memory speed. As you can see, mine is currently set to 6,000. So let's say the XMP failed and my PC is unstable. Well, I'm gonna drop the frequency by 100 megahertz. So from 6,000, I'm gonna drop it down to 5,900 or whatever is the closest. After that, I'm gonna hit F10, save the changes, and go back on the desktop. You basically have to repeat the process until you find a stable frequency for the memory. It all comes down to how well the memory and the motherboard play nicely together, or if the memory is on the motherboard's QVL. But if you keep dropping the frequency down and the PC still isn't stable, then it's better to go back in the BIOS and completely turn off XMP until you upgrade your memory in the future to something that's more compatible with your motherboard. All right, now let's get rid of all the garbage that's slowing down your PC and your PC's boot times. Right-click on the taskbar and go into the task manager. Then go into the startup apps on the left side, and here you will see a list of programs that will start up after your PC boots. And you're gonna wanna disable the apps that you don't care for. If you have a bunch of games installed on your PC, then I recommend disabling the game launcher of every game. You don't need every single game launcher to load up every time you boot up the PC. It just eats up additional resources. You can always launch whatever game you want when the time comes. Usually you want to keep the applications that are more important to you, like Dropbox, Discord, Stream Deck, and others. Right now your list might seem very small because you just finished building a PC. So I recommend bookmarking this video or reminding yourself to check again in the next few months. These next set of settings will improve your computer's performance by limiting the amount of resources it uses in the background. The first setting is Game Bar. This is notorious for eating up resources while in the background, especially if you have no use for it. If you don't use Game Bar, I recommend turning it off. Hit the Windows button, search for Game Bar, and go into the Game Bar settings and make sure that this is turned off. Having access to End Task right on the taskbar is a game changer. Instead of having to open up Task Manager and locating the application that you want to force quit, you can do it right on the taskbar itself. To enable this, just hit the Windows button on your keyboard and search for End Task. Then go into the settings, scroll down and find End Task and just enable it. Now you can force quit any application right on the taskbar. Please note that this might only be available on Windows 11. Game mode is another setting that you should always leave on. This will limit the amount of apps you use in the background and allocate those resources for your games, which will result in higher frames and smoother gameplay. To do this, simply search for game mode, go into the settings, and enable it. This next one is more of a personal preference, but if you're a competitive gamer and precision is very important to you, then disabling this one mouse setting will improve your aim by allowing your mouse movement to be more consistent. By default, pointer precision is enabled, and this basically changes your mouse sensitivity depending on how fast you move your mouse. This makes it harder to rely on muscle memory to land accurate shots, and it's one of the reasons why professional gamers have this setting disabled. If you own an NVIDIA graphics card, let's change a quick setting in the NVIDIA control panel to make sure your GPU isn't throttling the clock speeds on certain applications, which results in lower FPS. To do this, right-click on the desktop, click Show More, and go into the NVIDIA control panel. You can also find the setting on the bottom right tray. After it loads up, click on the Manage 3D Settings on the top left side, and under the Global Settings, scroll down and look for Power Management Mode, and change it to Maximum Performance. This is also a good time to make sure Windows is updated. Most of the time, there are optimizations and safety features that are crucial in keeping your system running smoothly and safely. So go into the update section of your Windows by searching Windows Update and make sure your system is up to date. And finally, here are some free applications that I recommend every PC owner to install. The first one is called HWINFO, and this is an amazing software that lets you monitor your system's temperatures and hardware info. This is also a great way to see if any of your components are getting hot to a point where they are thermal throttling. You can also check the clock speeds and temperatures of every single core on your CPU and much more. But if you want access to an overlay software to monitor your temps while you're running a program or playing a game, then MSI AfterBurner is where it's at. With MSI AfterBurner, you can overlay pretty much any hardware information while playing a game. Information like your CPU and GPU clock speeds, temperatures, and even your current FPS. Last but not least, I strongly recommend downloading Revo Installer. This is one of those apps that is extremely handy to have around, especially when you need to completely uninstall any application. When you normally uninstall a program from the control panel, it usually leaves a bunch of extra files, folders, and entries in the Windows registry. Revo Installer removes the program first by running the built-in uninstaller, and then it scans for leftover data and completely nukes it from your PC, so it doesn't cause any potential issues later on. Alternatively, DDU Installer works just as great if you only need to uninstall your graphics card drivers. DDU does the same exact thing as Revo, but for your display drivers instead. It completely removes it and nukes all the extra files that are left over, giving your system a clean slate to install your new graphics driver. Both of these are amazing free apps that I recommend everyone to install on their PC. These last few apps are purely for aesthetics, but if you guys are trying to get rid of your ugly, solid taskbar, then I recommend downloading TranslucentTB from the Microsoft Store, which makes the taskbar transparent, allowing full visibility of the wallpaper. Speaking of wallpaper, if you can't spare $5 and buy a wallpaper engine from the Steam store, Lively Wallpaper is a fantastic alternative, which is completely free. If you're running multiple monitors, you can customize a different wallpaper for each display. But the coolest thing about Lively Wallpaper, and why I prefer using this over Wallpaper Engine, is that you can add any wallpaper you want, as long as you have access to the original content. You can upload your own video directly from your PC. You can also find a video wallpaper you like from YouTube and simply copy and paste the link. Or you can screen record anything on your monitor and upload that instead. You can't do any of that on Wallpaper Engine. If for some reason you're watching this video before you build your actual PC, then I strongly recommend watching my PC build guide, which I'll link down below, for when you're actually ready to build your PC. It's a complete, detailed, step-by-step build guide that will show you how to build your PC from start to finish. If for some reason you guys want to get a hold of me, you can find me on my Discord server, which I'll link down below. I'm always active on there every single day, and we have a ton of tech-savvy members on there who are more than happy to help you guys out. If this video was helpful to you guys, consider tossing a like, because I'm pretty much losing my voice at this point. Make sure to subscribe for more awesome PC content coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you very soon in the next one.